Good evening, everyone. It is June 27th, 2023, and the time is now 6:08 p.m. So I now call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission is conducted via remote participation. We will make recordings available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. My name is Sarah Lewis. I am co-chair of the Urban Design Commission, and with me tonight is Courtney, my fellow co-chair, Courtney Kirk of the Division of Public Space and Urban Forestry. So we'll start with a roll call of the commissioners present. Frank Valdez, seeing none. Tim Talon.
Present.
Deborah Fennick.
Here.
Tim Hood.
Present.
Let the record show that we were aware ahead of time that both Andrew Abaugh and Sherry Ruane cannot be here this evening. So currently we do have quorum. We are hoping that Frank will be joining us later. The first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes. So we have minutes to approve for March 14th and March 28th. Does anybody have any comments, or do I see a motion to approve both of those?
I have no comments on the content. I think they're really well written. For one of the meetings where we reviewed the UDC recommendation, I think there was some question, and it's noted in the minutes about, I guess, how we incorporate feedback in the UDC recommendation when we are reviewing that after the meeting. And I think, Sarah, you were going to check with the city's legal department on that. Was there any updates on that?
I'm afraid, Andrew, do you have those handy? I do not. Tim, I am so sorry. I do not remember that meeting. I don't seem to have the.
All right, Tim, can you just remind me what you're looking for again, specifically what update?
So it was the meeting. I don't know which one of the day. I reviewed the meeting minutes last night. It was one of them, which was the meeting where we met only to review a UDC recommendation. I think we had a discussion about basically incorporating feedback, clarifications after the meeting about what was discussed in the meeting and incorporating that in the recommendation. And what the meeting minutes state is that there was going to be a follow-up with the city's legal department just about what that process looked like.
I will have to admit that since I had completely forgotten about that, I do vaguely remember it now that you remind me. But as we get into the next project, I will write myself a note to follow up with that tomorrow.
Okay, no problem.
Thursday, so I apologize for that.
No problem.
And that was independent of these two meetings, though. That was not the 14th or the 28th, I believe.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Tim, was that in one of those discussions? Yeah, because it sounds like it was in the meeting minutes, but I was supposed to follow up and then I forgot.
Yes, it was March 28th, 2023.
Oh, okay.
Chair Lewis reiterated that she would need to check on the legal status of adding items that may have been included in the recommendation, but may not have been included in the recommendation, but was part of the discussion. Like that.
So it's,
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So thank you. I do need to follow up on that, but then that's a follow up rather than a comment or adjustment to the meeting minutes, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, the minutes
All right.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve both.
And also
All
a
right.
second.
All right, so we have a motion to approve March 14th and March 28th, 2023 meeting minutes by Tim Talon, seconded by Deborah Fennick. Roll call vote, Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
and Tim Hood.
Yes.
All right, seeing all in favor, those minutes are passed and on the record. All right, so it turns out this evening that we do have a quorum problem for 142 Cross Street. Apparently make it this evening. So apologies to that team. Tim Hood was not in attendance at the April 25th meeting, but did listen to the recording. But Deborah, were you in that? You were
No.
absent at the meeting also.
Yes.
Okay, we do not have quorum, so I apologize to the team for 142 Cross Street. We will, Andrew will reach out to you tomorrow to make sure that we can reschedule, but we do have to, we cannot vote on that project, unfortunately, this evening. So moving on to the second item of 720 Broadway. While that team raises their hand so Andrew Graminsky can unmute and share screens as necessary, I do want to point out to the commission that there is a memorandum of understanding in place on this project with the Urban Design Commission. So there are certain parts of this building that cannot be reviewed. We still have permission to look at part of the building, and of course, we are the Urban Design Commission to look at the public realm as it's proposed. So we do have, I believe, Wendy from my staff is present to be able to answer any questions on the HPC process, should the commission have those when we get to the discussion side of this project. But Andrew, I think the team, if they're ready to present.
Sarah, if I could just ask one clarification on that.
Absolutely.
I understand that the HPC agreement kind of limits the ability to make any changes from what's currently designed, because that's what's agreed to. But are we also restricted from reviewing that? I think that's, you're saying that we're restricted from commenting on that portion of the building?
I think, let's put it this way. Comments may be made, but they cannot be part of the recommendation because changes cannot be made.
Okay. And I would imagine, just further clarification, I'd imagine the whole building is still subject to the zoning ordinance, including the design guidelines and facade design guidelines. So is there, I guess, is there a specific, I was just unaware of within zoning, the kind of specific requirement that
the historic ordinance is completely separate. It is not part of zoning. And so once a memorandum of understanding is negotiated and in place, then those issues cannot be revised or recommended. Andrew, is Wendy here? Can she perhaps explain a little better than I can what the actual
Yes,
MOU
Wendy.
says?
This is Andrew speaking. Yes, I'm going to promote Wendy to be able to speak to the commission. Hi, Wendy.
Hello. Hi, Madam
Hello,
Chair.
Wendy, sorry to do this to you, but I don't think I'm doing a very good job of explaining the details of what the commission is allowed to review this evening and not.
Madam Chair, through you, you were doing an excellent job, don't worry. But to clarify, the demolition review ordinance gives the Historic Preservation Commission the power to take off a demolition delay, which is 18 months, by coming to it as essentially a covenant with a property owner on preservation restrictions to a building. In this case, it was the design for 722 Broadway, because 720 Broadway did not meet the 75-year age limit to be under the purview of the Historic Preservation Commission. So in this case, the design of the building cannot be touched because a memorandum of agreement, also used to be called memorandum of understanding, it's the same thing. It's essentially a covenant, so by law they can't change it, they're signed into it. So that whole design for that section of the building cannot be touched, cannot be changed, and it just has to remain how it is that way. But you do have full purview over 720 Broadway.
And so that supersedes zoning requirements?
In this, it has to also comply with the zoning requirements. So for instance, height requirements, things set out in the zoning code must be followed. And that was, looked through. So there are some minor adjustments, but planner Sarah White, senior planner Sarah White, and I looked through that and gave it a quick review in consultation with ISD to make sure it was zoning compliant. So in that case, yes, it has to be zoning compliant. But that's essentially where the purview of all other boards and commissions needs to end for that sort of portion of the building.
But, and I'm sorry to prolong this, but just to clarify, I mean, part of the zoning code, Somerville zoning code, it's form-based zoning code, is specific design guidelines, just like there are limitations on height, setbacks, storefront requirements, other things like that. They're all part of the zoning code. So does the Historic Preservation Ordinance distinguish between height and other requirements like that, dimensional requirements, and the requirements that this commission is tasked with reviewing?
Madam Chairwoman, through you. Sarah White and I both work as regular planners for planning and zoning in addition as preservation planners. So we take on planning and zoning cases. 720, 722 Broadway, I wasn't just working on it from a preservation standpoint. It is also my case going through site plan approval. So we do look at that when it was coming through the MOA process. So it does take into consideration in the sense that Sarah White and I looked through those as it was going through the process.
So the short answer is, Tim, yes, it does meet the requirements within zoning. I think it'll make more sense when we start looking at the project, and then we can circle back to this conversation perhaps.
Okay.
If that's helpful. I think you will see that there are two distinct sides of the building. Facades on the building. So if that's all right with you, we'll let the applicant present and then we can come back to this. Wendy will be here to reiterate and help answer questions.
Thank you.
There's one thing that I realized that we had forgotten to do, or I should say Andrew reminded me that I'd forgotten to do because he's there to keep me on task. I need a motion that we continue for 142 Cross Street to the next meeting.
So
So do I have a motion?
Sorry, again, just to jump in. We made a motion where we continue the project to the next meeting, and then we had to come and meet just to continue it to the following meeting. So I just want to make sure our motion is continuing this to the next meeting that the project team attends.
Okay, all right, yes. All right, so let's reword the motion that says we make a motion to continue 142 Cross Street to the next meeting that the applicant can attend and we have appropriate quorum. How about that?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
All right, seconded by Jim Hood. Roll call vote. Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
and Tim Hood.
Yes.
Did I hear a yes? I think I saw.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for bearing with me on that one. All right. Now, 720 Broadway. This is an MR4 general building, and we need to vote on the facade, the design guidelines, and any additional design guidance. So Andrew, can you let the presenters?
Yes, this is Andrew speaking. I am promoting the folks who have their hand raised, including Christopher Vance, Ann Vigorito, and sorry, I can't see my screen, Aaron West. Could you, someone from the applicant team, please let me know who will be presenting their screen so I can give them those abilities.
Good evening, it's Ann Vigorito, Andrew. Andrew, it'll just be Christopher Vance because he is the architect. I'm just here to listen and for any guidance. We do have the developer on, but he won't be speaking. You know, this is Chris's show, let's just say. So I think it's best I let him move right along. Thank you.
We can see your screen, Christopher. Christopher, you are muted on your end.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. I have multiple screens, so I'm not sure which screen you guys are seeing. Are you seeing yourselves or?
Nope, we're seeing the cover of your.
Oh, okay.
Present.
Excellent. Great, thank you. So my name is Chris Vance, a principal designer at Vance Architects, and I will be going through the presentation today for our applicant DiCamillo Associates. This is our first time in front of you, so I think it'd be important. I think we already heard a little bit about the MOA and the HPC's role in the project. So I think it would be important to go through the program and the site context and location. So here you can see the locus map. So the property is located 720 and 722 Broadway, which is at the corner of Broadway and Willow Ave. It's also at a three-way intersection where Bristol Road intersects as well. And it's actually a culmination of three sites. So we have the site where Lindell's Bakery currently presides, and then at 722, which was the lot that was under the HPC's commission and purview, is a three-story gambrel roof wood structure residence. And then to the rear of this site is actually a parking lot, which services Lindell's Bakery now, and there's approximately 12 parking spaces. And here, pulling out slightly, you can see that we're located within a quarter mile of commuter rail. So the recently constructed Ball Square commuter rail, which runs along here on Broadway. So we're just slightly down from the Ball Square commuter rail. And through the—
Chris?
Yeah,
Chris,
go ahead.
quick question. We didn't see your slide advance. We're still looking at the cover slide, or at least I am. Can the rest of the commission see the slide?
No.
Oh, I apologize. I think it's sharing my other screen. So let me get
Also,
back.
if you could turn your camera on,
Oh, yeah.
if you can, that would be fantastic.
Oh, hi, sorry. All right, great. Let me see how I can share my screen here. All right, I'll just zoom in here so you can see it. All right, so I apologize. So this was the second slide that I was talking to. So here you can see the site.
I'm still not seeing the screen. There we go.
Okay.
Your PDF.
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. So here you can see the site. So as I was saying, it's a culmination of 3 properties. So we have the site where the Lindell's Bakery is currently presiding. And then at 722, which is the HPC site, is a 3-story gambrel roof residence. And to the south of the site, you have a parking lot, which currently serves Lindell's Bakery and has 12 parking spaces. And again, we're at the intersection of Willow and Broadway and Bristol. So here, if we pull out slightly, we are within a 1/4 mile of a commuter, the MBTA line here, which is Ball Square, which has been recently constructed. And so we're slightly down the road from that location. What I found very interesting as we did go through the Historic Preservation Commission and working with my clients who were longtime residents of Ball Square, that Ball Square has, since the 1920s, evolved pretty dramatically. It was predominantly, single family, 3-story gambrel roof structures. But as the population increased, there was a need for commercial spaces, so restaurants, grocery stores, markets. And so Broadway slowly transformed, and a lot of the residents were torn down, and the single-story masonry buildings were constructed. So as you look along both sides of Broadway, you see sort of a patchwork of different buildings. So you have a combination of 3-story masonry buildings, some single-story masonry buildings, commercial spaces. You also have still some of the historic 3-story gambrel roof residential structures, but that whole facade has really transformed since the 1920s into the current condition that we see it today. So it's an really exciting opportunity to present the proposed project to you, because it's really invigorating the Ball Square and creating a really unique structure within Ball Square. So quickly going through the project summary, we are in the MR4 district. It is a general building. We're 4 stories with a gross floor area of approximately 35,824 square feet. We will have about 4,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor, along with the residential lobby, mail room, bike storage. And there will also be 20% of the 34 rent units that will be affordable. We are happy to welcome back Lindell's. We'll be designing a new space for them at that ground floor commercial space. So they will be continuing to live on their legacy at the corner of Broadway and Willow. We do have studios, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units, a mix of different sizes and unit counts, and again, the commercial and residential lobby space. We are improving the public way. We are extending the Broadway streetscape and the Willow streetscape by 2 feet, so we'll have actually a 12-foot sidewalk along both of those elevations. We are including some additional visitor bike parking, a designated rideshare parking space, and we are also having a green roof that will be up on the 3rd floor as part of the amenity space for the residents, and permeable pavers for the parking area. And I'll jump to the site. So here's the proposed site to orient you. Broadway is to the south of your screen, and Willow runs north-south along the west side. We will have 4 parking spaces, one that's going to be an accessible space, and 3 additional spaces. One will be the ride share, and then the 2 other spaces will be for servicing the commercial space, which will be Lindell's Bakery. We do have a service drive, which will allow for deliveries off of Willow Street and also allow for trash pickup. We also do have a large 40 bay bike storage towards the east of the site. We are going for to be FIAS certified. So we will be meeting all of those requirements, also following the construction control through that process, and we'll be looking to achieve our certification through the process. So, there's a commitment from DeCamillo Associates to help be a stock to the Somerville sustainability buildings. And we've done this also through working with Verdant Landscape to achieve the green score. So we need to be a minimum of 0.25, and currently we're at 0.32. Okay, jumping to the facade studies and the facade elevation options. I think I'll jump quickly here just to give you a sense of what Sarah was talking about at the beginning of the presentation. So we did, as you can see here, this portion of the building, which I have highlighted that says Somerville HPC approved by MOA, is the 722 site, and that's where the existing 3-story Gambrel residence currently sits, and was also deemed to be historically significant. So we did work with HPC to develop this facade elevation. And the idea here was to bring historical elements into the design. So looking at the brick pilasters, the long vertical bays to give more of a historic street front. So that portion is continuous through all of the facade studies. So I'll jump back here. So this is looking at the corner of Broadway and Willow. So we're proposing, you do see on the historic portion that we have a red brick blend. And then on the new contemporary design that continues up Willow Ave, we're looking at incorporating a dark gray blend up on the 2nd and 3rd floor. So we start to horizontally organize the building. So you can see at the podium level, we're using a precast veneer material, which also ties into the historically approved portion, which has a variety of the precast elements for the sills and headers and at the parapet. So that way we don't separate and disregard that historic portion and trying to tie it in as a cohesive design. We're also proposing that the linear, so if you look at the historic portion with the sort of strong vertical linear designation, also gets pulled out with the projected bays. And for the projected bays, we're proposing a standing seam vertical metal that has more of a lighter tone. So if you look at some of the brick tones within that ball square area, you do see a lot of light tone. So we're trying to tie in that color palette. And then when you get to the 4th floor, looking at a fiber cement siding, which is lighter in color and sort of disappears into the skyline. And as you turn up Willow Ave, we do have some street trees that we're preserving, and there's also the residential entrance. So we were really trying to promote the Willow Broadway corner by recessing the entry into the retail space. So you can see here where it says 720 and Lindell's Bakery. That gives some relief to that streetscape and brings pedestrians into the commercial space. That entire front facade on Broadway will be the retail space. So you can see this vignette here that we have the recessed entry at the corner of Willow and Broadway, and that whole pedestrian scape will be the retail Lindell's Bakery. So they will be taking up that entire retail space. So here again, you can see how we've integrated the precast and the materials into the contemporary and the historic approved section. So that, and we also use some long linear bands to tie the entire podium around up Willow Ave. This elevation here from Willow Ave, you can see that as we move towards the rear of the site and the building, we lose that red brick facade and it becomes its own element. And this is the residential entrance. And you can see the glass stair tower there that services all 4 floors. And then towards the rear where this tree is, we actually have parking that's under the second story of the rear protrusion there. So you actually park under the building, so it gives some protection. And it also gives some relief from being, right up against the property lines. And then up on the 3rd floor, where it steps back here, that would be the amenity space and the green roof. In this elevation here, we're looking at the rear of the building. So this is the raised portion where their cars would park under. There would also be the service entry for the retail space, trash, and bike storage. And this gives you a sense of some aerial perspective, so you can see how the building is tied in at all elevations. So again, we have the historic HPC portion with the red brick, and that turns the corner and ties into the residential up Willow Ave. Okay, moving on to the second facade option. Again, using a similar palette, but this time taking not just the precast elements from the HPC approved portion, but also taking the red brick blend and that pilaster element and tying it all the way around the podium. So the color spills around and really ties the 2 buildings together, even though it's one building, but broken into portions. And again, using the long band that goes around at the second story. And again, trying to promote the Broadway Willow corner. So at this time, I stepped the materials down, so it really draws your eyes into that entrance. And then also breaking the parapet at that corner. So it makes it a little more dramatic, but at the same time, it brings your eye down and emphasizes that, that commercial entrance off of Broadway. And again, you can see we're using the dark brick blend for the 2nd and 3rd floor. We have a combination of Juliet balconies as well, so that residents can open up, hear sounds, and interact with that streetscape. And then the lighter material would be the fiber cement lap siding. So from looking straight on at Broadway elevation, you can see how we stepped down the design, so that really brings down that corner, at the same time stepping it up to make it dramatic, and having the similar recessed commercial space entry. Again, that commercial space would span the entire Broadway elevation. So that would be Lindell's with various entry points per the SCO. And again, turning up Willow Ave, you can see that we brought it back to having some projected bays. And then also the stair tower here breaks down. So up on the 4th floor, that stair tower doesn't pull all the way through. So it's creating more of a horizontal banding. And here again, looking at some perspectives, you can see the stepping down on the material, the recessed entry at the commercial space, and then as we turn up Willow, the projected bays for the residential units. Okay, and then moving on to facade option 3. Here we took a deviation, still working with similar materials, but starting to really undulate and break down the scale of the Broadway elevation. So starting to look at how you have distinct proportions. So taking the materials from the podium, bringing it up and bookending at the corner of Broadway and Willow. So this really creates a strong element at the corner. And then again, allowing some balconies so that residents can interact with that streetscape, open up and actually come out onto that Broadway facade. And then as we turn up Willow Ave, starting to bring in some of the red brick blend from the historic portion so that it starts to unify the two different ideas and designs there. So for the projected bay, we have the vertical standing seam for this long bookend that wraps the corner, looking at the dark gray brick blend. And again, still using that vertical linear band to tie the podium together and also give some protection on the Broadway streetscape. So here, looking at straight on elevation, you can see how the elements start to break down. So that parapet for the historic portion, as you move left, we really make it dramatic and break up through so that it bookends the Willow and Broadway elevation. Again, playing with textures and the materials so that you start to break down that scale of the facade. As we turn the corner and go up Willow Ave, we still have the tall stair tower, but then bring in the red brick blend so that you start to break down this facade in a similar manner. So you have various depths of projecting bays and also having the exterior balconies right at that corner, making it very interactive to the streetscape. Same for the Broadway ground floor elevation. That whole commercial space again will span that front facade. And this is the rear elevation. So we did break down the corner slightly where the building turns to the rear so that you do have some protruding balconies. Same with the parking that's under the second story. And then again, up at the fourth floor here, it steps back and you have your amenity space and the green roof. Looking at some perspectives, again, you can see here at the corner of Broadway and Willow, we step it back, we break it down with some balconies, and then using the materials to bookend and create that effect at the corner. So here looking at all three options together. So this is the Broadway Willow elevation or corner perspective rendering, and then the front elevation to give you the sense of how we played with the undulation and the scale of the three different facade options. So that is the last slide I have.
Can I ask a quick question? So in the elevations of Willow Street, it actually appears like the street tree that you're preserving is in front of the driveway. Can I see the site plan again?
Yep. So the drive is actually to the north of the tree. It's so where the tree is located is, so all these parking spaces are actually under the second story of the building. So you would pull in here at the curb cut and then you would park under the building.
Okay, all right. I got that part. It looked like it was in the driveway. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. I have one question on option 3, but I'm going to be quiet and let the other members talk first.
So I have an initial question about the part that we're not supposed to comment on, but I do have a question about it, which is, it's supposed to have historical reference to it. Are there any buildings, in the near area that were inspiration for the design of that or references for the design of it?
Yeah, so directly across.
Yeah, that's a 3-story, that's a shorter building.
Yep, so if we look at this building here, the Arthur building, That's a brick 3-story building. It does have a lighter brick color, but it has the precast elements. So we started to bring in those pieces.
It doesn't have the amount, the ratio of window to wall and things like that, which, are very different. It's a very different idea of building. I mean, the only thing you can say, I guess, is that it's brick. It has the precast elements, so anyway, I just wanted to put that out there as I'm having trouble understanding how, it makes sense here. But I guess,
Yeah.
I guess the rules are we have to accept that as we look at this.
Yeah, we also had to meet the glazing fenestration percentage, which requires a larger amount of glazing at the ground floor. So that's where some of the glazing elements had come from.
Yeah. Have you done the FIAS? Have you done the study of that in terms of amount of glazing?
We have.
Yeah, I'm probably okay because of the other sides. Yeah, there's a lot of glazing for for what the context. So doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But so I guess I don't know if my colleagues have any questions, but I do have a preference with what you're presenting. Unless
I had
some
I had some
questions.
questions, yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
You want to go, Tim?
Oh, sure. So thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the summary slide as well. It's nice to be able to see both images and then all the elevations on one page. Deborah took my first question. I was wondering what the historical reference was as well. I'm having trouble understanding that piece and how it relates either to any historical precedent in the immediate context or really anywhere else within some of those squares. This is one building, correct? I mean, per code, this is one building, it's one floor plate, it's occupied, it's one.
Correct, yeah.
Was there any explorations that you did or discussion of making this, designing this to architecturally feel like one cohesive building? Rather than two side by side.
Yeah, there was, the working through the process, we wanted it to not feel like a complete replica of a historic building, especially as, Ball Square is an evolving architecture type. And so there was really no strong architecture type within Ball Square that would lend itself to say, okay, there's a really strong, red brick vernacular in this area. So we wanted to introduce contemporary elements, push Ball Square into more of a state of art using more contemporary materials without completely being a replication of a historic building. And that's where we got playing with some of the darker brick colors and looking at the the standing seam materials, also bringing in some precast stone elements. So using more contemporary textures, but using durable materials that you would find on a historic building. So
my other question was just how the brick turns the corner along Broadway, adjacent to the other house, the yellow house.
This house here.
Yes. The material was done.
Yeah, we turn the pilaster and bring it back 3 feet just to bookend that portion.
And then the other materials along that face.
Are you talking about here or which these materials?
Image 3. Yes, correct. There and then at the base of the building.
Yeah, so these are fiber cement panels that would just turn the corner. We did recess a portion of the building so we could get some windows in the units, but that just wraps around the building.
So fiber cement on the upper stories and then at the base, also fiber cement?
This was going to be, we were looking at different materials, but it probably just a jumbo brick material.
I just had a couple questions. So the retail storefront that traverses both facades, right? It like the facade on Broadway in the historic portion and the part that we're reviewing, that's all the same retail space, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then with the bonding of the brick, was there any type of bonding that was determined that, you know, like a just a typical running bond, or was it something different that you're planning to carry over in a few of these options?
Yeah, so we were looking at, so the running bond for option 2, when we brought the pilasters, the columns around the corner to tie into the historic portion, which would have a running bond. Then we were looking at more of a stacked bond for where we use the dark brick blend. Again, bringing a little more of a contemporary texture to it.
I've got another question. There's a few different heights of windows shown, and it seems like, so for example, the windows on the corner have horizontal and that aligns with the top of the doors to the Juliet balconies. Then there's 2 panes above. Is that vision glass or is that spandrel glass?
Are you talking about on option 2?
I think it's in all of them where the head of the windows jogs across the elevations.
Yeah, so that would be just a tall transom.
But it's vision glass, so you have tall ceilings in those units. So
We do.
the ceiling actually aligns with the head.
Correct.
So the quick question I had was, I know this is a little nitty gritty, but the willow elevation of option 3. It seems that there's at least to me, like there's a brick pilaster missing on the corner by the stair tower. It sort of just goes from glass
Yes, here.
around. And so I wondered if that was, you know, sort of what reasoning behind that might be.
Yeah, I don't think that was intentional. That we would have, you know, bring this down to frame out the entry for the residential. So I think that's a good suggestion and detail that you picked up.
Right. And there,
Last-
yep, go
One
One
for
last
it.
question. Has there been any discussion with the Public Space and Urban Forestry Division about the potential for street trees along Broadway?
We did look into it. Unfortunately, there are a ton of utilities running up Broadway under that sidewalk. So Verdant did look at it, and we don't think it'd be feasible based on the amount of utilities that are running up Broadway.
I'm just gonna jump in. I mean, perhaps you spoke with our urban foresters, but I'm fairly certain that our tree planting crew just cut open a hole in front of this area and planted a new street tree. But just I feel like there's a lot of potential for this corner of Ball Square to have a more enhanced public realm. The most common feedback that we get from Ball Square is that there are no trees, there's not enough public street life, and I think that especially on this corner, just rethinking perhaps some of the ground floor, like you have a whimsical bench in the back by the trash, the dumpster. Like if you could take some of that square footage and shift some of the setbacks on the front, I think you would have a lot of customers that would be really excited to sit in an outdoor dining, cafe, seating area right on Broadway or even on Willow. This is such a prominent corner in Ball Square, and also I feel like I would be upset with myself if I didn't talk about the like cartoon graphic sign of Lindell's Bakery and how I think the residents of Somerville identify that so much with Ball Square. And if this project doesn't bring some element of that back, then people are going to be really sad. So I think that there's a lot to be re-examined with the streetscape, and I think mobility, I know they're going to ask for better improvements at the crosswalk on Willow. So I think it's worthwhile for this team to talk to our streetscape public realm crew for a little further discussion, because just the opportunities for Ball Square, this project should be taking every opportunity possible to make a really great public realm with this project.
Great.
To piggyback on that a little bit, just to make sure, it's hard to tell from here, so I apologize. So under the zoning, you do have to have the building has to be set back from the curb, so there's 12 feet. Is that already here? I'm sorry, it's hard to tell on the screen.
It is, yeah, we do have 12 feet, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So that does give us a little bit more room, but Courtney's point about placemaking is a good idea.
Yeah, the current Lindell's Bakery sits right on the sidewalk, so we are pushing it back 2 feet so we get our 12 feet.
Okay. Now, the other thing I'd be remiss to point out, and I know this is the Urban Design Commission, so I'm apologizing for wearing my zoning hat, is given the proximity to the train station, you are not obligated to provide any parking. I believe you're within the quarter-mile radius.
We are correct, yep.
Okay. That's a choice of the developer.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And
I
that,
think
that's
actually,
a choice.
I mean, I'm as much a fan of reducing parking as anyone, but having some parking on here, if Lindell's really is going back in here, one of the few times I drive is when I go pick up a cake. And having an accessible space as well, I think is important there. But I agree completely with Courtney's comments about the public realm. Appreciate the setback. I mean, I think 12 feet is there's a reason the city established that as the standard. It's a comfortable sidewalk width, but there's a lot of, just the addition of street trees is a huge missing element in Ball Square. And if there's the opportunity to add this project, then I'd rather see this project propose it and then get into construction and then have a discussion with planning about why it's not feasible because of some existing condition that's uncovered, rather than making the assumption now that it's not feasible.
So, Tim, you broke up a little bit there. I had a hard time hearing the last few sentences.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I was
there's
just
a
saying,
lot of garble there.
I'm going to blame GoTo meeting.
I don't blame you.
I'm saying I would rather see the project propose the trees now and then have to have the discussion later on if some existing condition is uncovered that makes it not feasible, rather than just assuming now that it's not feasible to plant street trees.
Yeah, I mean, we'd absolutely love to have street trees. I mean, it would help with green score, and so we'll definitely, you know, I'll have Vernon take a look and see.
And I think carrying the same, it looked like on the landscape plan, there was a change in material at the property line. I think carrying that materiality to the face of the building and being, you know, thoughtful about the planting zone, pedestrian zone, frontage zone. Yeah, there's no, I don't think there's a need or reason to need to change material right at the property line.
Well, I think if
we're gonna all be one.
Yeah, I think we're looking at sort of the streetscape and that public realm and creating a space where, you know, you're changing material so that, you know, if we do look at tables or, you know, activating that space, I think having that change really kind of distinguishes that area. But, you know, something that we're also looking at permeable paving for any new introduced paving.
You look at that corner, the corner of Willow and Broadway, it makes it feel tight. And it isn't, you know, you're pulling back at the entrance, but just that change in paving material and where the transition occurs makes it feel squeezed there. The other thing is the entrance at that corner, and I think that is a great part of the building that exists today, is that setback entry, and I'm glad to see you carrying that through here in some form. But I think it's worth, you know, maybe looking closer at the dimensions of the existing entry and how that setback is working, and you know what really works here. You're also bringing down a pier in that corner, a big pier, that creates an obstruction where there is none today. I think one of the nice things about that corner today is there is no obstruction there. That covering is cantilevering out over it. You know, I think of someone kind of walking up, you know, maybe they walk up to the door, they leave a stroller sitting outside, they grab another child, walk in, grab something from the bakery, come back out, lean a bike up against the building, all the types of things that happen day to day.
Just responding to some things that have been mentioned. It looks like from the elevations, and I can't really tell in the plan, but it looks like there's 3 sets of doors on the Broadway side. And just kind of reacting to what was said earlier about the street trees, this being a prominent corner in Ball Square, reacting strongly to the public realm. There's some elevations that indicate activity, some tables and chairs outside on Broadway, and just looking at what the paving is doing there in relation to where that potential program is. I think it would be nice if there was some like a dimensional plan that kind of outlines where these separate functions of the urban realm occur, and how they all kind of work with the doors, work with the trees, the bike rack, and then the 12-foot setback that you're providing. There seems to be a lot going on that facade, and I do agree that it would be great to show additional trees here if we can get them.
Yeah, certainly.
I'm going to echo a lot of the comments that my colleagues made. I think this is really important, and I think one of the delightful things about this project is you know who your tenant is going to, your ground floor tenant is going to be, and it's going to be, I'm imagining they're going to expand a bit, and they're, you know, have the opportunity of sort of changing them themselves or expanding what they offer. I could see people using, running in here before they go to the subway, sitting on a bench in front of the building, under a tree or behind a tree, to, before they run across to get the train, that sort of thing. I think this is going to be very active, much, a lot of opportunity with this. And I think it's really important that it's thought through, there could be some area, that area could be on Willow. That has a somewhat southwest orientation, I think, right? Willow Street, yeah. So maybe there's some area, a little bit of setback. I mean, if you look at Davis Square, what is it? The crepe place, Mr. Crepe. There's, what is it? Like one person, you've got probably less than 3 feet, or about 3 feet taken up by the dining. And I don't know what kind of zoning requirements there are, but, even if you needed to get another foot out of this or something, I think that's all really important. So I wanted to go on to the 3 options, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I guess given my questions about my first question about the reference through that building, I think it is, well, I know this neighborhood's going to change quite a bit, but I think it not having any kind of references, I would not extend the language of that, to the rest of the building. I think I prefer the alternate, or I think there's more potential with the first alternate in just letting that, what you're designated, or has been designated as the historic section of the building, and letting the rest of it, read as, as housing, not trying to carry any of that language across. I mean, and that language, I could imagine you have, there is a reference along the right of way where the green line is running, because that's where you have industrial buildings. They're all brick. That's not, this is not right along there. It's not a part of that. It's much more a part of a residential community. So I think it does want to, be more a part of that residential community and find a way to be, coexist with the historic brick element. So I do think there's more potential given that logic with the first one, the first alternative there. I think that it's the quietest and it is the most sort of legible, I think, as I think it's legible as housing that, that section of the building. And I think the one change I would suggest considering is, I think some of the other 2 schemes, or one of the other 2 schemes, cuts that the stairway off, that and sort of continues the datum that's at the top of the 3rd level and separates it, because I think it transitions into, a larger scale thing, and where you want it to really start to be most sympathetic to a residential neighborhood. And so I think, and then it might help hold on to that back piece that I think I'm not sure how good a neighbor that's going to be. It's got a lot of underside, dark underside of building, as opposed to having a wall. I think anywhere in that that elevation that is the side of the building, what is it, rear elevation, where it can actually come down to the ground and ground the building a little bit and expose less of the underside of the, of that. That's going to be just a dark space there, which I think is sort of unfriendly next to residential things. So as much as, there's, I don't know, it looks like sections where you can actually bring wall down. And then I think also, and again, back to the Willow Street side, you tying that piece together with, by extending that above 3rd floor datum, that sort of holds on to that addition, I think it would be an improvement too. So those are my general comments about the alternatives.
Thank you.
So I've got a few. One is picking up on Courtney, your comments about signage, existing signage, but also the overall signage ban. The signage ban on the building, distinguishing the upper stories from the base feels narrow to me. And I think that is, when thinking about relationship, the context here, that's a distinguishing feature of buildings in Ball Square and the other squares as well. It's a really robust, prominent signage band that helps the upper stories of the buildings in these commercial districts to recede and the ground floor to really be present on the street and provide that life on the street. So I'd just ask that you look at the proportion of that, considering other buildings in Ball Square as well. I think, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I'm troubled by we'll call it the historic piece, but it feels like a pasted on facade to the building. That like a Western storefront or something, where it's a piece that isn't cohesive with the overall whole. There's a zoning design guideline. The two or more wall materials should be combined only one above the other, except for bay windows. It's clearly speaking to the desire for kind of a cohesive overall language and horizontal separations between materials. And the basic strategy here is contradictory to that. So while I agree with Deborah that just carrying those piers all the way around the building, all around to Willow, I'm not sure is going to be successful. I wish there was one option, and maybe it is a variant on option 1 or option 2, but at least tries to make this feel like a more cohesive whole.
To follow that up, I think that was one of my reactions as well. It's too bad that it's not possible to comment on the historic section. The concept of having a cohesive project here, I think is important. I do agree that I don't necessarily think it's important to carry over the language of that historic piece. I think the languages can be separate. I am kind of more partial to the schemes that are more responsive to the corner. It's really a strong approach point, just from walking down the street, walking from the T. The schemes that celebrate that corner, it's open at the first floor, which is great. I think that the first option, that the bay window is maybe slightly too close to the corner. It either wants to move a little farther away, or it wants to change some massing there at the corner, just to recognize that corner, just because it is fairly close to the corner. Regarding the stair tower, I think it was kind of nice when it kind of dropped off at the third floor. I don't necessarily think it needed to be kind of a element that separated kind of the rear part of Willow from the rest of it. And then the comment about trying to make the rear feel less, I guess, cavernous and kind of less in shadow. And I think one idea might be to try to bring some vertical surface there down to the ground, and not sitting on top of a column. That might make it feel more like it's continuing a part of the main mass of the building. So initially, those are my comments.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a clarification question? So it seems like we're all leaning towards option one. However, Tim H., I want to come back a little bit to what you said about the corner. Are you proposing to make it more prominent there should be another bay on the Willow side, or
Well,
I know you said about setting it back a little bit from the corner, so you get you read the
Yeah.
bay after the bay.
I think
But you also said about the prominent corner, so I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something there.
I think my reaction to this option was that the bay was very close to the corner, and it didn't really recognize or celebrate the corner the way the first floor did. The first floor sets back and has the entry there, and the corner isn't celebrated above the first floor or really kind of recognized in a stronger way. So that might be able to be done with option one, either maybe carrying some of the materials of the bay over across the corner, or maybe some slight massing changes. And then if the corner, if the intent of this option was to really suppress the corner, I kind of feel like it's a little bit too close, and the massing just might want to be pushed away a bit.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I think another thing that I think is heading in the right direction with option one is I like the simplicity of the Willow Street elevation. It doesn't have a lot of bay windows and stuff like that, and it really makes the Broadway elevation the primary elevation. And so I think that's one way that it helps hold on to the historic piece in my mind. It's treated, it's definitely creating a primary face, which Broadway makes sense. It's not the residential, it's the commercial street. It's a very busy commercial street. So I would say that the quietness of the Willow Street facade on option one, I think is a strong move.
I also wanted to add kind of what Tim had mentioned about the scale of the banding, of the sign banding. I also felt that it was a little thin. That was part of my reaction. The current building, the banding, the sign banding, and the signage is really it's very iconic to Ball Square, and people definitely identify not only the bakery but the signage. So I'm not sure if there's a way to acknowledge kind of the way that how strong it is on the existing building and reflect that in a proposal here. But it did seem to be a little thin.
Yeah, Tim, I think that's a great point. I think a way to make that corner prominent, without making a tower, which I think this, option one, having biases, the commercial facade. But you could, at the signage, do something that's bolder. And I think that would be more meaningful, really, for street life, to have maybe a backdrop to the signage that maybe does turn the corner. So, you can see it walking, approaching this building along the sidewalk, as well as the one that is on. Then that would sort of give you the corner emphasis. I think that we're looking for without, having a full-blown tower or something like that, which I don't think is as good a response. So anyway, I think, doing something with that sign rather than band gets broader there, or there's some, you know, somehow it's held, it's very clear, and it's integrated, but it is, you know, brings a bigger scale to that corner. More identity to it.
All right, we are way past our 20 minutes of discussion. Do we want to keep going, or are we ready to vote on a facade option?
I've got just a few, maybe two more quick comments. What I am concerned about the west elevation. It is adjacent to the 2.5-story house, which I assume isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So it's going to be a pretty visible side. It is the approach into Ball Square. So I wonder if carrying the brick around the corner on that side of the building may help it feel like less of a pasted on storefront. There's a lot of materials on any of these options, including option 1. I think I'm counting 6 plus the fiber cement, plus I think there was another one used on the rear elevation. So perhaps if the brick carries around the corner and the fiber cement panels go away, and there's one less material, and there's a way to kind of further simplify the overall material palette. Yes, in terms of voting on a facade option, it sounds like there's some acknowledgement of good elements of 2 and 3, but kind of coalescing around a modified version of 1. I personally would still, and think it's important for this building and consistency with the design guidelines, that an option be explored that's a more cohesive whole. Because really, these are 3 variations on the same concept. So I'm curious, Deborah and Tim, what you think about that? You know, perhaps asking the applicant to come back with a mod as well as an option that is an exploration of a more cohesive whole.
So given that we can't change the, due to the memorandum of understanding, are you saying you sort of want the pattern of the historic building to inform the cohesive whole?
I guess I would need to, and maybe the materiality, if not the pattern. I think Deborah raised the differences between this and what's across the street. Both are brick buildings, but one is, this is a pier expression. The one across the street's a punched window expression. 2 totally different ways of using brick. You know, maybe it's more of a punched window expression in this side of the building that transitions into the pier expression that isn't changing.
Yeah, I was also trying to determine the historic precedence for the historic part of the building. I'm not certain, you know, if it was from the Ball Square area or somewhere else in Somerville, but I think it would probably be a good idea to have an alternate scheme that does try to explore the themes that Tim is talking about. Where is it possible to make this project feel more like one building than 2 buildings next to each other with, you know, there's no party wall, but you know, it gives that illusion that there is one.
Yeah, let me check because I don't know the wording of the MOU specifically. It might be that the historic portion is supposed to be articulated different than the new portion. I am not entirely certain. So, but I think there's probably ways to incorporate the material as Tim. Oh, there's Wendy. Wendy, thank you. What does the MOU say?
Madam Chair, through you, the MOU does not specify that it needs to look separate from the 720 Broadway property. We did that to allow more design options for the other building and also to create a differentiation between the two buildings, but it's not in the MOA to be required that they be separate.
Yeah, it was definitely brought up as a design point and element through our meetings that they like the idea of some distinction between and making it look like two separate buildings, but tied together. But the MOA doesn't state that.
So both Tims, does that add clarification or just make it more confusing?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like it's feasible to explore an option that looks at a more cohesive whole.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I mean the scale of the glass in that portion is just, it's not a punched opening like across the street. It's a different experience. So I don't know if that would necessarily mean referencing that in a concept that tries to tie both parcels together. It seems like it may want to reference it but not replicate it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think there's ways of looking at
Go
those.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I definitely think there's ways of exploring those options, and I, through the conversation, I can sort of hear that desire to have the two talk to each other. So I think we can certainly explore that.
But just a closing comment, I think ultimately it's really about the ground floor in this building and celebrating that and the activity that takes place there and kind of the identity of that ground floor. I think a success there would be the ground floor feeling more prominent in the upper stories of the building.
All right, so if I may summarize, I've heard a couple of recommendations. But it sounds like we want to see one more option. So I think it's do we have a motion to sort of explore option one a little further and look at an option 4 that is a more unified elevation incorporating the historic portion? Is that a fair statement?
Sure, yes. So moved.
All right. All right. So we have a motion to explore option 1 further and to look at an option 4 that incorporates the historic building into a more unified building. So we have motion by Tim Talon. Do I have a second? Am I frozen?
Sorry, can you,
We're frozen.
can
Oh,
you,
okay.
can you summarize the motion one more time?
Yes, so the motion right now is that we would like to see option 1 explored a little further. Actually, let me we are motioning to continue the project with option 1 to be explored further and another facade option number 4 to look at incorporating the historic building into a more unified whole.
Yeah, and I think those are two very different approaches. One says it maybe tries to separate the historic building from, from the rest of the building and incorporate some of the other comments that have been made, about streetscape and the back and stuff like that. And then the other one is, yes, is as you stated it. And I would, I would second that motion.
All right, so we have a second by Deborah. All right, roll call vote. Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
Tim Hood,
Yes.
Tim Talon.
Yes.
All right, so so we will, Chris, we will work with you and the team. We will look forward to seeing you at the next meeting with more options, or I shouldn't say the next meeting, the next meeting to which is appropriate for your schedule and design time.
Appreciate that.
You have enough pressure on you without me putting putting constraints.
I love deadlines.
All right, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
On that note, I think for a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
All right, Deborah moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by, was that Tim Hood?
Oh, I was seconding that motion.
Okay, perfect. All right, roll call vote. Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
All right, Tim Hood
Yes.
and Tim Talon.
Yes.
All right, we have, thank you all. We have meeting adjourned at 7:36 p.m.
And everyone.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night.